Can you share some strategies you have developed to effectively edit or improve content from non-native English speakers?
First of all, you when you get a something, even now, when I get something, I do not start editing immediately. I read a bit. That it is also a fact that most of the publishing houses know that Indians make very good copy editors. A lot of work gets outsourced to India, so people know that. And so when you're working with different cultures, you should first of all know your subject, and then you should also
Yes.
know what it means in each culture when the author is trying to say something. It
Mhm.
still is, I think in some ways it is. Hi, I am Malathy Garewal. I am an Indian who's living in Dubai. I am a I, s- I am now the editor of a magazine. It deals in very high-end luxury watches and jewelry. My career has been quite a very very varied kind of a thing, because I started initially my first job was in research. I was researching the problems of the elders throughout across the cross section of society, the poor, the rich, the middle class, uh,
Mhm.
but all of them elders and their problems they're facing, the socio-economic problems they're facing. And this kind of made me very interested in the problems of the elders themselves. I had if started, once I finished my college, I did my undergraduation in English literature, and then went on to do my post graduation in anthropology. So I realized that I had not spent much money on my education, and I had done a master's, which was a huge thing in India. And I realized I couldn't have done it anywhere other than South India, because nowhere else is education so cheap. And I wanted to give back to society, and I was looking at ways of doing that. And HelpAge, once I did the problems of the elders, I was like, okay, HelpAge is where I want to work at. And so that's how I first started working with HelpAge. I worked with them for 6 years, nearly 7 years, and then till then I was a very ideal kind of a person, giving back and all that stuff. And then I realized that reality intruded. By the time I was married, I had children, and I needed
Wow.
money to pay the fees. And I decided, okay, time to move on. Enough of because I thought of 5 years, and I had already done 6 or 7 years by then. So I moved into the corporate world. And once I started looking for a job in the corporate world, it was very difficult to get in. And one of the persons that I met was a consultant, job consultant, and she looked at my CV and said, your CV doesn't have any errors, so do you want to become a proofreader? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds exactly like what I would like to do, because, when anybody gives me invitation card, with whichever language it be in, I mean, as long as I'm familiar with the language, I usually find faults with I'm looking at oh, there's an error over there's a space over there should have been a comma here. That is the kind of things I was looking at all the time. And if that could be if people saw it more as fault finding, but if there's a positive spin to it, that is a proofreader or copy editor's job. It's exactly, I was like, oh, so that is actually something good that I could do. And I loved reading. So if somebody's going to give me money to read, I mean, there's nothing like that. So that's how I became a proofreader for a BPO. This was around 2000. That was the time that the whole ITS segment was IT and the ITS segment was booming in India, and Office Tiger was one of the earliest ones that was set up by an American guy. And so I joined them. I did not join them as when it was established. I joined them like maybe a few years later, 3 years down the line. I think I joined them, and I learned a lot from them. So it was in that job that I moved on from becoming a proofreader to quality control and everything else. And then after a few years there, I moved to Bangalore, and so I had to look for jobs again there. I worked in Macmillan, and so it went on like that, different places, different roles. So
Mhm.
now here I'm in Dubai as a copy editor.
Great. Great. So you have worked with various authors from various cultural and backgrounds. So can you share some strategies you have developed to effectively edit or improve content from non-native English speakers?
Yes. So yeah, because when you're working in any of these really big publishing houses, you tend to come across multiple authors. And what happens is that first of all, when you get a something, even now, when I get something, I do not start editing immediately. I read a bit, maybe one or two chapters in a book or an article. Of course, I try to read the entire article once so that you get the gist of what the author is trying to say. And when you're dealing with English authors, people who are writing in their native language, it's easy. And when you're talking about native language, there is something again that is a fallacy. People tend to think that only people from the US or the UK are native speakers. It is not. Nowadays, a lot of Indians are also native speakers. uh, Maybe not me so much because I still grew up speaking in Tamil and outside and Kannada at home. But my kids uh, grew up studying, learning, speaking Kannada, English at home a lot more than they spoke Kannada, which is actually very sad because I really tried to teach them to speak in their mother tongue. But when there are linguistic I mean, my parents were from different linguistic states, and I and my ex-husband were also from the. He's a Punjabi. I'm from South India, so there's a lot of languages playing around, and then English becomes your common language. So there are actually a lot of people from India who speak very good English. Who consider my daughter considers herself a native speaker, actually. And but it is still sad that because the world doesn't see us like that. They still tend to look at our names when you are putting in an application, they say native speaker, and the moment they see Malathy Garewal, that is not a Western name. So I do not come into that thing at all, which is very sad. That kind of prejudice is there. But going beyond that, it is also a fact that most of the publishing houses know that Indians make very good copy editors. A lot of work gets outsourced to India, so people know that. And so when you're working with different cultures, with different writers who are writing in different languages and all, their native tongue influence comes in. What we call a mother tongue influence or something. For instance, words like prepone, which is something very commonly used by Indians, is not an actual word. It perhaps might be now because I think internationally not too many of us Indians are using it, and probably the one of the dictionaries recognize it as a language, a proper word, but it is not. So these kind of things creep into our writing when we do that. What we speak is how we write most of the time. And if people who are copy editors usually are readers who are obsessed with reading to some extent, and that is how we come into copy editing. But for instance, people who write may not necessarily be doing the same thing. They may be interested in putting forth their views. You may have something to say and you want to put it to a wider audience, and you do it. But then uh, you're you're still thinking in your native language. You're still thinking in your thing, and that creeps through. So a good copy editor has to kind of make sure that that does not come into it, because we assume that it is going to a wider market, which is an international readers, and that thing should not creep in. So that is up to the copy editor
Yes.
to change it, but not still keep the author's original thought. And that
Yes.
is quite a difficult thing to do. So you should first of all know your subject, and then you should also
Yes.
know what it means in each culture when the author is trying to say something. It's
Mm-hmm.
still, I think in some ways it is difficult to copy edit an Indian writer to an international audience, because so many times we don't realize that it's so natural to us that we don't think it is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're saying, for instance, in India, we still say, "What is your good name?" Nobody says that now internationally. They just ask you, "Oh, I am this, and what are you, or whatever." So it's not no longer your good. That good name thing is very very archaic when you don't use it.
Mm-hmm.
But then similarly, so that is one thing to be guarded about. But other thing is also that when you're doing somebody, say like a Chinese or somebody who's writing in English, it becomes, if they are not good speakers of the language, then it becomes really difficult. So yeah, you had to kind of balance all of this,
Yes. Yes.
and try to make sure that you're getting the
Yes.
ideas across.
Yes. But I'm still happy, instead of facing a lot of problems, our Indians are in Dubai and working as a proofreader, as an author, which is a great thing. And you didn't stop that thing to come in your way, and you're still teaching the same thing, passing the same thing to your daughter. which is a great thing. Like it's not common nowadays. So you're a social worker as well. So you're experienced editor and social worker. So how your background in social working influenced your approach to editing and communication, and how you found these things valuable in your experiences?
Uh, I am not really sure whether it is social work that influenced my editing or writing skills or the other way around, because what happens is I would say that my editing skills, my language skills come from my reading habit. And a reader is always considered, I mean, most readers, when you're reading so much, you're obsessively reading stuff all the time. And half the time you're reading fiction. I honestly read fiction. I do not read much of academic stuff. And earlier I used to feel a bit ashamed about it. Also about the fact that my favorite reading is romances. And it seems very dismissive. People are dismissive of that. They're like, oh, chick flick, you read chick lists, you know, romances, and that's all. But it's a thing that it actually makes you more empathetic person, because fiction makes you see things from different people's perspectives. You see different cultures. You read about different cultures. You understand how they think, how they feel, and that kind of comes into you as a person. And perhaps that is one reason why I did want to do social work. I do not know. Could have been an influence. On the other hand, I have been a social worker. I do know what are the problems that a lot of people face and all. And if someone is writing something which doesn't seem right over there, that's the time for me to point out, I think this may not be the correct thing. So maybe you should rework this a bit more, or this is not the right thing to do. So yeah, I mean, it works both ways, of course.
Yeah, that's amazing, amazing. So your involvement into quality assurance, as you told in the starting, how you step, how one company helped you to getting into quality assurance thing for global financial printing. So could you please share your story, your highlights, your process, how you ensure accuracy or consistency in high stakes environment, or what skills you think uh, which aligns with editor and technical writers as well.
So, like I said, my first job and in the field of language was with R.R. Donnelly, which was actually Office Tiger in the beginning, and we were getting. I used to work for a thing called Boston Consulting Group. They used to outsource their work to us, and we used to do it for them. So, and then we moved on. We had numerous clients, and then we started working with R.R. Donnelly, which I think at that time they were the second largest printers, financial printers in the world. I'm supposed they still are, or maybe they're the first now. I don't know. So with them, I mean, all of the work was actually very, very, very serious. You could One minor error could get you kicked out of the job immediately. I mean, immediately, as in like out now. And people had to just leave, without even saying goodbye to your friends. They just walked out the door. The security escort out of the door, basically, because this was a time when like I said, ITS was new to India, and we still did not know a lot of the rules that govern uh, work ethics, basically. Not the kind of work ethics that Western world had already known for a long
Yes.
time. So Ara Donley especially used to print IPOs for companies. We used to do the financial statements for them and all of that. So if any of and companies like Boston Consulting Group, for instance, they're being consulted to talk about mergers, potential mergers that could happen, or the impact of some product in the market or something like that. So all of this was very, very high stakes, like you said. So, one minor mistake or one minor word in the wrong years, it could get you into insider trading. For instance, you could actually do insider trading, get the information here and then go trade in stocks outside the company or help someone and just do it. So we were I think the first batch who initially thought that nothing goes out from here, work environment, whatever you learn here is that. And I think we were one of the earliest lots who actually had all of our keystrokes, recorded. We could not access outside stuff. It was seriously high security stuff that we worked in. And working on that kind of a thing was like 1 0, if you miss out a zero, for instance, or a point, you put like, instead of saying $900,000, if I said $90,000, that would result in a very huge loss to the company. And they're going through the hell out of you, your company, like your company is out, and the first person you get cut is you. So everything is high stakes, and we had to be, and we were working in shifts, so we would be actually working in the night, and sometimes your eyes are like 3 in the morning, your eyes are, you want to just sleep away, and you still can't because you still have to make sure that this goes out on time. So yes, that was very thing, but it also taught us how to be very accurate and stuff, because we had, I think, 98.4 or something was supposed to be accuracy versus rates, and on-time deliveries and all of that, which was like 1 second late was still a late delivery kind of a thing. So yeah, I learned how to do that all in a very high pressure environment.
Great.
uh, Basically, what you learn is that you cannot afford to let your guard down any point of time. And when you're working across, we had really huge projects which would go on through like 4 or 5 shifts, and 4 or 5 groups of people worked on it. But one person who helped me sense it out is the person responsible. So if it went out in my shift, I was the lead quality controller. That would mean that it went out, it was my, if something was wrong with it, it was my error. Nobody else was, I was the first person to get asked for it. So consistency, again, consistency.
Yes.
I think as a copy editor, consistency.
Mm-hmm.
As a copy editor, as a proofreader, as a quality control person, consistency is the key for
Yes.
everything.
Yes, you highlight a very important point, consistency and other things which are not important into editor job, but I believe in everyone's job.
Yeah.
And secondly, your story from, you know, searching for the jobs and then getting the idea from someone to become a proofreader to make your position in the foreign company, your status, and then passing the same values to the children. I think it's a great achievement, and I believe it might see like in one word, it might see that it's less journey. Okay, she did, but I believe it's a long process, it's a long thing, and it has the has it's had its own uniqueness and hard work. So thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. And today you just shared you didn't only shared about your business, about your position, but you shared many other valuable things to the society. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thanks a lot.